Good morning. It's Thursday again. It's Think Differently Thursday. And yeah, lovely today to have a friend to chat to. So this is my friend Helen. Good morning, Helen.
Hello, Helen. How are you?
Hey, it's the Helen and Helen show.
Absolutely. All the best people are called Helen.
Or it's something about the age we are. How are you?
32, isn't it?
32, absolutely. How
Yeah.
are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Apart from a slight bit of hay fever, so if you see my eyes leaking, it's not that I'm crying over
Emotional.
what about. It's not that it's that emotional. It's just that my eyes have been streaming over the last couple of days. So.
Oh, okay. Obviously, Helen, I know you. You're my friend. Not everybody does. Just give us a little tiny bit of background on who you are.
Okay, I'm Helen Wire. I grew up in Suffolk, North Suffolk, part of a farming family. Lived in Suffolk for most of my life. Had 2 years living in a mud hut in Africa, in Zambia, which was amazing. Worked in America for a year, and as a family, worked in and lived in Australia for about 18 months. So married to Chris and I think, well, this is terrible, isn't it? I can't actually, I think it's
How long?
28 years, I'm sure.
We'll edit that bit out. I'll just bleep over it.
And have 2 children, Tom and Emily, and they're both living in London. Tom's 25 and Em's coming up 23. And I'm sure I'm not old enough to have children of that age.
Oh, tell me about it. It's absolutely ridiculous. Tell me about it. So I talk to people from all over the place. Some people are from the Forge, which is not you, but I do know that you would know people at the Forge, wouldn't you? Or even I was chatting to Steve Miles a couple of weeks ago. You would know people like that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I had a chat actually on Zoom with Steve Miles. Probably early on in lockdown, just to catch up. But people like Steve Miles, Steve Fenning, big part of my childhood and teenage years. Yeah, time at Sizewell with them and things like that. And quite often bump into Steve, not so much nowadays in Tesco's, but Steve Fenning and I have had a few laughs at the tills in Tesco's.
So if you've known Steve Fenning that long, you must have some stories that you can tell about him. I just feel it's good that we see that other side of our leader at times. Go on and tell us something about Steve. Are you related to him? Are you actually related to Steve?
I am somewhere along the line, but please don't ask me whether it's second cousin removed or anything like that, because I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, it depends who asks me as well, and in what environment, whether I admit to being related or not.
Go on then, what's your funniest story about Steve?
Just a couple, really. There's one I remember being very young, and we used to go to lunch at his mum and dad's, Bob and Eunice, and always always in the afternoon there would be cricket. They were all cricket obsessed and things like that. I do remember once Steve refusing to be out, even though all of us could see that he was out proper, but he a little bit of a hissy fit there about being
not unlike the story Steve Miles told us about it.
So that's one, and I was probably only about 6 or 7 at the time, and he's I think he's only about a year older.
Oh, a lot older than us, I think he is.
But that made me laugh. And the other one that really does make me laugh is when I was teaching, I asked Steve to come in and do some assemblies for us and to do some of my RE lessons. And he got known as they all thought he was a vicar, and he got known as the handsome vicar. And all of my year 6 girls used to say, when's the handsome vicar coming back? when we had a local vicar of a parish church coming in, and they all said, well, he's not as handsome as Steve. And that used to really make me laugh.
Love it. Steve Fenning, the handsome vicar. Brilliant. And so you've just mentioned teaching, and so that's how we met. I think I've worked it out that it was 2007 that we met, because we did our teacher training year together, and so I think we hit it off. I think we were kind of at the same stage of life. We'd both got kids, and we were kind of carving out this new career in life. But it was a pretty hard year, wasn't it? But we had a lot of fun, didn't we?
We did have a lot of fun, and I was thinking about it actually this morning just before the call, and I do remember, and I'm a little bit concerned that I was the one that was taken into, I think it was Carol, the lady who ran the programme. I don't believe you were reprimanded, but I
I don't know what you're going to say.
I was taken in and was
Oh.
told that we weren't allowed to sit together on the same table because we laughed too much and we were really naughty and things like, which I cannot believe was us, Helen. I really can't.
We laughed so much, didn't we? I
And
don't think I knew that. I don't think I knew you got told to.
Oh no, Carol had me in there and was wagging her finger. I felt like the naughty schoolgirl in my late 30s. And what happened was we didn't sit on the same table. We were split up. And
We
then
wrote notes.
or we would write notes, or we would text each other, and it was exactly like being back at school again, being 9, and I loved it.
I'd completely forgotten. Do you remember as well? This is bad. We used to start stories, didn't we? So
Absolutely.
we would start a story and then we would pass
it over and pass it on. Yeah.
Oh, that was bad. That was bad. But I don't remember not sitting with you either. Surely we did carry on sitting together quite a lot of the time.
I think it was probably slightly forgotten. I think we did the 2 days of, okay, we will sit on different tables, and then, yeah, just assumed that everybody would forget and went back to how we used to be.
Well, I think it was kind of survival techniques. It was a hard year. There was a lot of hard work. We would got young kids at home, and so I think we were justified in making ourselves laugh quite a lot.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we made it through. We qualified and became teachers. And I went off to teach at St Matthew's in Ipswich, and you went to Henley. Had you done a placement there? I can't remember if it was.
No, I didn't do a placement there. I did my placement at Woolpit where you were, but we didn't coincide in the same term. And Great Barton. So I was at those schools. Yeah, and then got the job at Henley. About the May time, I think, started in the September. So yeah.
And a good school. Did you enjoy it? You know, when you look back on teaching, was it a good time?
I did really enjoy it. It was hard, as you know, and the pressure sometimes and things like that. But on the whole, I would say I've very fond memories. I had a fab staff to work with, still keep in contact with that. And I think that makes such a huge difference. It was a small school, so you had to wear so many hats, you know, because there wasn't all the jobs still need doing, whether it's a small school or a large school. Loved year 6 because, and that was what the year I stayed in. Yes, it's the pressure of the SATs, but I think they're not that sort of, they're not too stroppy teenager, but you can have a lot of fun and laughs with them, and so yeah, I've got lots of very fond memories of that time, and I learnt so much. You know, it was a very steep learning curve, but I just learnt so much. So yeah.
Did you think that in that kind of decade, did you see teaching change? Do you think we saw a lot of changes over that time?
I think so, and I don't know what you think, but I would say it was by the time I left teaching, it was a much harder job than when we started. Whether some of that was because, again, we were wearing different hats and had different responsibilities, but I do also think with the curriculum change, I can't remember if I went through 1 or 2 curriculum changes, and the expectation getting so much higher and things like that. We also became, from Ofsted, an outstanding school, which everyone was like, oh, that must be amazing, and we deserve
so much pressure, doesn't it?
we deserve that. I really believe that, but it brought so much pressure, but then I can look back on that and think, well, that was the catalyst for me going on to do what I do now, because had we not have been outstanding, then we used to have a lot of student teachers come and work with us, and they would often come and be in my classroom. I was a mentor for a while, and because of that I was sent on then a coaching course which sparked my interest. So you can look at it in 2 ways. It brought an awful lot of pressure, and I would say that's when I began to lose my passion for what I was doing.
But I guess that was it. Was partly because you were beginning to do some other things, and you could see this new path kind of forming, couldn't you? So yeah, you've alluded to it. So you did leave teaching. So tell us about what you went on to do, or what that journey was.
Yeah, so I think at that time, I was beginning to think, not so sure about this now. It's a very different job. Still loved doing what I was doing. I loved being in the classroom. I loved the interaction and the laughs we had with the children. I think I was known as, I can remember when we used to do transition, and people and some of the children would write to the class, say, who were coming up to me about me and things, and it used to be, she's really strict and she expects us to work hard, but we'll have an awful lot of laughs along the way, and so I thought that was really quite nice. But the expectation for year 6 began to feel really unrealistic for an awful lot of children, and seeing their self-esteem plummet and all sorts of other things. And then I think it would have been like an autumn term, and a really good friend of mine that I'd known since I was 6, we'd been at school together since I was 6, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was about the October-November time, and she died before Christmas. It was incredibly quick and very shocking for her family, for her friends and things like that. And I can remember, I think it was a couple of days before her funeral, I just remember waking up thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. But I didn't know what that next step was. But I knew that things were changing, and for my own mental health and things like that, and to fulfill that passion in me again, to make that difference, that I needed to go on to do something new. But I didn't really know what that looked like at the time.
Okay. So what were the steps then? What did you begin to investigate, or what doors did you start to push that led you in another direction?
Well, I've been sent on a coaching course anyway, as part of being the mentor, and I used to coach staff at school, and also I think when I was there I thought, this is all very familiar. I've been teaching in this kind of way for a long time, but known that that's what it was called, hadn't known that it had this label of a coaching style or things like that. But it felt, I loved the course, did it up in London, and it just felt like coming home. It felt like putting a cozy coat on and things like that. And I really loved it and thought, I could do something with this. And that sparked my interest. Did a lot of reading, did a lot of soul searching, did a lot of, I'd love to say to you, do you know what, Helen, everything just went sailing, and it was a transition like this. But you were there for some of it. There were a lot of tears, there were a lot of heartache, but there was also some really good times. And then I sort of got into the therapy world, did some therapy training, and that's where I am now. Set myself up as a therapist 3 summers ago now. So
and I find it fascinating when I meet up with you and we talk about the work that you're doing, and you just tell me at times how you are helping people that have fears and anxieties, and some of the techniques that you use. But I think I'm always fascinated as well when you talk about how so often when something that is about mental health is put right, then physical things get corrected as well. And it's just incredible, and it really makes me so aware of us as a whole person, and how it's all interlinked, and almost you can't ignore one part of your well-being because it's all connected. And that's your experience, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've become, they always say when you start out as a therapist, or when you start out in any sort of business, that you need to niche, and all this sort of stuff. And I can remember thinking, well, what do I niche in? I like to.
What is your niche?
What is my niche? I like doing everything, and I do think I do think your niche finds you sometimes.
Okay.
If you don't know what your, you know, what your niche. I was just like, well, hey, I love doing everything. I like making that difference, and I do. I really, really love making that difference for people. And so my person I saw yesterday, my last client yesterday, and she just said to me, I've got my life back. I feel freer and lighter than I have for years. So she was crying and I was crying, you know, and that's what really lights me up.
And this is because people have carried these fears and anxieties, and they've controlled their lives, they've restricted their lives. Absolutely. And then they spend some time working through it, and they conquer these fears.
Yeah, and I think because of all that, I seem to be attracting more and more, probably because it's my passion as well. So I'm almost, you know, putting more stuff out there. And when I see people, that's what I'm talking about, is the anxiety, there's a lot of anxiety related illnesses such as irritable bowel syndrome, psoriasis. They're all rooted in anxiety. Right. Sometimes, again, like you said about the arthritis as well, can sometimes be rooted in sort of an emotional trauma at a particular time, and then that can go on into the body, because we hold so much tension in our body without even realizing. And often after a session or two with me, people will suddenly say, I've noticed that I had this leg pain when, you know, and that started going, or my shoulders. I, for one, know that I hold tension, if I hold it anywhere, in my shoulders and neck. You know, it's just what we're designed to do. Animals tend to have, if you've seen an animal, and you know it from David Attenborough and things like that, they've been chased by a lion, and the first thing they do tend to do afterwards is they do this massive shake, you know, and that's their way of releasing all that trauma and this, that, and the other. We can't do that.
We haven't got that technique.
It look quite strange if you were to do you know, and things like that. So we do hold more trauma in our body than we necessarily realize, and it's often not till we've worked through that and let that go and sent it on its way that suddenly it's like, oh, I feel really, really different. So so I'm really beginning, not me personally specializing in anxiety and stress and things, but the people I'm working with, you know, and some of the people have been through dreadful experiences of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, but trauma is trauma, and everybody is going to have very different tolerances to, you know, what could be somebody could just shrug off, to somebody else that's going to be quite a huge thing, and that's fine. It's just, you know, that's why we're all so unique and individual. So
it must be hugely rewarding for you to have somebody that presents with lots of anxiety or fears or whatever it is, and for you to take them on that journey. And I know it really surprises me when you talk about it, that often it's quite a short journey as well. I've got in my mind that it must take years for people to recover from some of this stuff, but it must be just wonderful to see people, to have people saying I've got my life back, and that you've been instrumental in that, must be so wonderful.
It is, it really is. I mean, you can probably see the big cheesy grin on my face at the moment, and it's just an amazing feeling. It's what I went into teaching for. I wanted to make that difference. When I look back for everything I've really done in my life, you know, living in my mud hut in Africa and things like that, it was to make a difference to a different society, a different culture and things like that. But to see these people, so for somebody, say, I took a phone call on Monday or Tuesday of this week, and it was somebody with irritable bowel syndrome, and she just said, I'm so trapped in my house. She said, I daren't leave the house, and I need things to change. And I know within about 5 or 6 sessions, she'll be able to. When you hear back, and I get emails from people going, I've gone on holiday for the first time in 10 years, or I know things are slightly different at the moment, but I've gone up to London for, you know, a day out or something like that. That is just so rewarding and so lovely. And I take my hat off to anybody who's brave enough to just go, hey, I need some help
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You know, I really do. And some of the things that people have gone through, that they're happy to share that with me. They're
Yeah.
happy to trust me
Mm.
to help them. It's just, yeah.
Mm. And is there an element sometimes as well of, you know, if people are saying I've got my life back, or, you know, life is easier, is there an element of, why didn't I do this before? Or why have I spent all of those years trapped and like, and then...
Yeah, I do get a lot of that. I had a text from, it was quite a young girl that I'm working with. It was, I think it was last week, and she said, I wish I'd found you sooner. And I always say to people, and I'm a great believer that people find me at the right
Right
time
time.
for them, you know, to make that change and
So I
to...
guess they've got to be in the right place as well in their own
Yeah.
minds in order to address the issues.
And yeah, absolutely, totally. And again, I always say to people, you know, this is as much, I can help, I can support, I can encourage, I can guide, all this, that you know, you yourself
Mm.
have got to make the changes. You know, I'm a bit like a driving instructor sitting beside somebody, but I can't actually do the driving. That's down to you. And people have to be in that right place, definitely. But also, hindsight's a wonderful thing, you know, to think, oh, if I'd have known about you 10 years ago, you didn't, you know. So
Yeah, absolutely, it is what it is. Yeah.
at the time, on the level of awareness we have of what's around us at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many of us a year down the line, the things we know, things we've learned things, and would go, oh, had I have done that again, I would have made a different decision. But of course you would. You've got more information.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you finding yourself busy at the moment? Are people, because of what we're living through, which is unprecedented, you know, are you finding that people are more anxious? Are you finding people are coming with different worries and fears? There must be a change because of what's going on, or is it just accentuated what you're doing?
I think it's mostly accentuated. I think if
Okay.
anybody has been sort of suffering from anxious thoughts and sort of things like that, this will have heightened it
Yep.
hugely. So, for example, I think it was, I was taking the dog for a walk the other Friday evening, and my phone rang, you know, and it's asking to book an appointment. And I usually say, you know, how can I be useful to you? And she just said, I saw the news about Bournemouth Beach, and was crying her eyes out because the social distancing, according to how the media portrayed that, hadn't been observed, and that had really heightened all those anxious thoughts and feelings. We've already had our first session, and it turns out that she's feeling this kind of way with all, you know, however, it's really accentuated it. Also seeing, again, I saw a chap on Tuesday, yeah, it was Tuesday, and he, a lot of stress. He's been working flat out 7 days a week.
Sorry.
And suddenly it's just overwhelmed him. Now
Yeah.
we've got that bit of a pause. And I think people have had, I know you and I have talked about this before, people have had such very different experiences.
Yeah.
Some people have been working, I mean, my own husband included. I didn't see him probably for the first 5 weeks of lockdown because he was working, it seemed, almost 24/7. Whereas other people went straight onto furlough. Some people were furloughed at 100%. Some people were made redundant. You know, so everybody's experiences are so different. And I think there was something going around on Facebook, I think it was, and it said, I'm fed up of hearing that we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're not.
No.
We're on the same sea and we're in the same storm.
Yeah.
But we're on boats that are very unique to us. And that's been my experience.
Yeah.
That some people have come to me quite upset and said, but my experience, you know, is so different from my neighbour. He's on furlough and he's loving it.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
So,
And even the whole connection thing, some people feel really disconnected, don't they? I actually feel better connected. Just feel like I'm speaking to people, you know, like this, but it's just made me feel hugely connected. But yeah, again, people could be doing the same thing, but feeling something different, couldn't they? I know I had to be really mindful of my language as well. I think certainly early on, because we weren't in school, I felt that the whole pace of life was slower, and I was loving the slower pace of life. And then I said that to a few people, and I realized actually, you know, they'd got young children at home, they were trying to juggle many more things than I was, and it was difficult. And yeah, they were kind of almost like, what do you mean this slower pace? It's worse, it's faster, it's harder. And yeah, just mindful of that, it being, as you say, a different experience for everybody.
and that language that you said there is so very important. Even the way we talk to ourselves about different things, you know, I've done quite a few for different groups. I did a talk for some small business owners quite early on in lockdown who were obviously really stressed, really worried about things. And I said, again, it's those little nuances, those little semantic changes of our words of language. And I said, because I think somebody said, I'm trying desperately to think of the word she said. It was, no, it's a he. And he said, I feel as though my business is just, I can't remember the word, but it was very, a very negative sort of word. And I said, what about if we change that to, let's have a bit of a pause and a reset? And immediately it was just like, oh, yeah, that's different, because actually I have been working on my website, working on this or something. So it's that little language change
Yeah.
can sometimes make all the difference.
Which I guess is a really good strategy for life, let alone for what we're living through now, just the way we talk to ourselves. One of the kind of benefits for me of it feeling slower at times, especially early on, was that I read more than I would normally do. And I read this book. I've grabbed it because I knew I was going to speak to you. So I read The Choice. Oh, that's backwards, isn't it, on here? And I know that when I was reading it, I was thinking of you so much, because it's the story of a concentration camp survivor who then went on to train as a therapist. And I was just so interested in her strategies, and her mindset, and I guess attitude to, the book's called The Choice, and I know you've read it now, haven't you, as well? This whole you can't change the past is what it was, and obviously her past was more horrendous than anything I can even comprehend, but that you can't change that, but what you can do is choose how you move forward, and how you react to what's happened. And all the time, I think I messaged you like, have you read this book, and are you reading this book? Is that very much how you approach your practice and how you deal with folk?
Yes, yes and no, but yes, I mean, I thought the book was amazing. You know, I absolutely loved it, and it resonated so very strongly, because a lot of it is the work that I do. And a lot of people come to me and they feel very stuck. And again, that choice, the more choices you give somebody, the more they're more able to be stuck, to be unstuck and things like that. And but it's a very it's a process for some people. Just sometimes something you say will just really resonate with them, and it's time they can go forward with that. But if somebody has come to you with, you know, deeply depressed and this, that, and the other, and I just go, well, it's a choice. You know,
Yeah.
You have to bear in mind and
Like,
how
snap out of it.
absolutely. So, but you're right, there is definitely a choice. And she talks in there about Viktor Frankl, who was probably one of the sort of founders of psychotherapy as we know it and things like that. And his experiences of being in that concentration camp, and he said, so, you know, they were given a hunk of bread and horrendously watery soup or something like that. And I remember reading it, and he said he had the choice there of thinking, I've got this bread, a few mouthfuls of it will keep me going. I'm grateful, I'm thankful I've got the bread. Whereas other people were going, well, how am I supposed to survive on this bread? It's going to, and he said what he noticed was the people that were getting so, well, it's not like it used to be, and it's not like, how am I going to do this? And getting very cross and angry tended to be the ones that then became ill or were sent for selection and things like that. So his experiences in the camp and how people reacted to it. And he said, I used to make himself make that choice of, okay, it's not what I would have wanted, because we can't always be totally unrealistic and go, well, hey, this is like a steak and chips dinner, you know, but just go, okay, it's not what I would have wanted, but it's going, you know, I'm grateful I've got something to give me some nutrition and some sustenance. Something I encourage people to do, and to, I think the therapy word is probably called reframing, and that can be enough for somebody. I had a lady, I always remember her, probably when I first started, and she sat there very tearful, and she just said, look at me. She said, look at me, I'm totally broken. What do you think of me? And I just looked at her, and we'd already had a discussion about some things, and I just said to her, I see a very strong person. I said, look at all that you've been through. She was in her 40s or something like that. I said, look at all you have been through in those 40 years, and you're still standing, and you're still being a mum, you're still being a wife, you know, things like that. Look how strong you've been, and what a support you've been to your family, to your friends. This is now time, though, for you to pause and help you. And just even that kind of just slight turn of, and she, remember her looking at me and going, you really think that? And I really did, because I was sitting there thinking, oh my word, look at what you've been through. I cannot believe you're still standing. And for her, that was enough encouragement to start her on that journey of being well. So
very, the mind is a very powerful thing, isn't it? And the way we approach things is so important, I think. Within the book as well, forgiveness was quite a key theme. Is that something that you find as well when you're talking to people, something they need to work through?
Absolutely. You know, forgiveness, and not everybody's ready to do that, and that's, again, that's their choice, but to encourage gently that forgiveness. And it's a two-way process. It's forgiveness sometimes for the people that have hurt you, and I think what people sometimes misunderstand is that they think that if you forgive somebody, then you're letting them off the hook. And I was fortunate enough, I was fortunate, I really believe that. We went to Auschwitz 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a harrowing place, but it's amazing as well. And when you've come out, the thing that really strikes you is the love, the hope, the compassion, and the forgiveness. And I took a picture of there was a one of the display thingies, and it was somebody, it was a survivor, and he said that if you hold that hate in your heart, you know, which we all know, who does it actually hurt? It hurts you. It doesn't hurt the other person. And he said, it doesn't mean that that person's not accountable for their actions. They are, but you're giving yourself that gift, and it's almost forgiving those people, but you're doing it for you, and forgiving yourself as well for feeling that way, and learning that sort of compassion and that and having that grace to be able to do that, I think, is really important.
I'm such a big fan of forgiveness for exactly what you're saying, because I think the most powerful part of it is not necessarily what you're doing for the other person, but it's what you're releasing yourself from. You're releasing yourself from that anger and that bitterness and all the stuff that eats you up. You're allowing yourself to be free. I get that.
I noticed that there was somebody I worked with not that long ago, and when he first came in, again, the body language, and I'm going to really exaggerate it, but he was kind of like this, you know, and it was as though literally he was carrying the weight of the world. And by the time, you know, and he didn't want to forgive. because again, under that, it's like he wanted revenge, and it's just talking all through that about how helpful it is, and it's actually giving you that gift and things. And when he was able to do that, you know, the difference in his body language more than anything else was just amazing.
Yeah, great. We've got a series at church coming up in the autumn called Culture Shift, and one of the weeks is going to be looking at mental health. So I'm sure things like forgiveness will come up in that, and just looking at how God and faith all fit in with this whole area of mental wellness. Do you think that at times Christians think that they shouldn't seek help over their mental health in the same way as they do perhaps over their physical health? Has that been your experience?
Absolutely, yeah, I see that quite a lot. And one of the first things sometimes people say to me is they're almost embarrassed that they've had to seek help, which is still a thing, whether you're a churchgoer or not. You know, I think mental health is getting better. I think we've still got an awful long way to go for people to be quite free and open with that. But a lot of people feel very guilty that that prayer hasn't cured their problem, you know, be it depression or anxiety or all sort of things like that. So, and again, I think, you know, I've shared this with you. You know, I'm a great believer that God gives gifts to all sorts of people. You know, to you for being a fabulous teacher, to Steve for doing what he does, for a surgeon, for a GP, you know, but also for a therapist. And a lot of people, some people can get through all sorts of things by themselves. Great, that's fantastic. But a lot of people, you know, you wouldn't hesitate on, as I say, if you've got a heart problem, you would go and see somebody as a heart specialist or something like that. And it's a similar type way. And I do think that God gives these gifts to people to help people out in that kind of way.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure, you know, within that series, when we talk about it, I'm sure that's part of what will come out, that I'm sure God can heal supernaturally, but also I'm sure more commonly he uses other people with skills that he has given to come alongside and to help people work through stuff. Yeah, definitely.
And it's taking away that judgment that the person often, and it could be perceived, or they may have actually experienced it, you know, you know, there's that guilt of coming to see somebody like myself, say.
I guess that is also tied up with society, and like you say, I think we've got so much better. I think it's not a taboo thing anymore. I think we do talk about mental health much more, but still probably quite a long way to go, because we don't always understand it, and if we haven't experienced it, and I haven't suffered with my mental health, but I am acutely aware that that anybody could at any time, can't they? It doesn't mean that I won't, does it?
Not at all. And it might just be, you know, circumstances and things like that. It might be that you've got those innate resources that you're able to tap into and things like that. But for some people, often it's very circumstantial. A lot of things have happened to them in a very short space of time. You know, I used to be a teacher, and I still like my toys, and you've seen me actually use this one before.
Yeah.
And I liken this to our brain. When, you know, when we have any stresses, whatever that is, whatever that looks like to us, because they're unique and different to each individual, you know, we go into that fight, flight, freeze mode, and that's really important to get us out of trouble. You know, if we're on a motorway and something's coming towards you, you need that little spike of anxiety like that in there to make you have a reaction, to think, right, I need to accelerate, I need to get on the hard shoulder to keep you out of trouble. What often happens though is and then normally this just comes back down again. When we get a lot of things, and that can be grief. So a lot of different things that we're grieving, whether it's people, whether it's loss of a job, loss of a pet, loss of everything happens in very quick succession. And again, that time period is so different on different people. That goes up like this, but it never has the time to come totally back down again. So once it's up there, that's when people start feeling really unwell, because you know, all the emotional side of our brain kicks in, and the more rational, logical side of our brain isn't able to rationalize and reason and things like that. So that's often when people seek me, and my job is to help getting that reset, so to speak, to give them that freedom. So.
Yeah. Do you think that there's going to be lots of difficulties with mental health sort of when we come out the other side of coronavirus? Do you think people kind of getting back to some kind of normal, or even just mixing with lots of people and interaction again? Do you think that's going to be problematic for people, and that you're going to be working through stuff with people over that?
I do. I think I'm seeing a lot more people, as I say, finding going into lockdown was actually easier than coming out.
Yeah.
Because coming out, there is that fear factor involved. What will this look like? What will happen? You know, all this sort of business. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of that. And also quite a lot when people are in that situation. So if it has been somebody working extremely hard, you keep going. You know, the adrenaline is you to keep going, and then suddenly it's like a pressure cooker that just goes. You're also going to have people, and I was contacted the other day, so things like if a loved one's died, and the way funerals had to be conducted in the early days, I think now you're allowed 30 people, but even so, when I think back to the funerals of you know, close family or friends that I've been to, everybody coming together, that love, that hug, you know, and things like that has meant so much to everybody who's grieving, however close or distant they are. And having to do it via Zoom, you know, just 10 people, not having that cup of tea and cake afterwards time, may have an impact on you know, in time of like, oh my goodness, you know, look what happened. So there'll be lots of different things, I think, that may come up for people. Loss of jobs, loss of businesses, you know, if it's things like that. So yeah, I think everybody, I mean, you hear it's bandied around an awful lot, that be kind, but it's so true, you know, be kind, because you don't know what other people are going through. But it also works the other way, be kind to yourself as well. So if you're having an off day, because we all do, you know, people say, oh, you're a therapist, you've got everything sorted, you'll never feel any emotions, this, that and the other. It's like, I'm a human being.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, it's really interesting to talk to you. I love hearing about the stuff that you do, and I think I would, and I have recommend that people come and see you, because just to know that people can work through things and find that life is so much easier as a result of it, I think is just brilliant and exciting. Just as we close, I think we're all being much more mindful of mental well-being. What would you say if you could just say 3 top tips for how do we look after our mental health, maybe now, but maybe, you know, as a general kind of thing for life? What are the 3 things we should all be doing?
Oh, there's so many, but
you're only allowed 3, Helen. 3.
Okay, oh, that's tough. Okay, I would say having that compassion for yourself is really, really important, because a lot of people, again, one of the first sentences that people often say to me is, I shouldn't feel this way. You know, I hear that so much, and I often then say, well, if that had been me, or if it had been, you know, one of your close family members, what would you have said to them? And people are generally very kind and very compassionate to their friends, family, but they have so much higher expectations of themselves, you know. So it's being really kind and compassionate, and a bit like the lady I just said to you about, thinking, wow, you know, look at what I've been through. No wonder maybe I am feeling not quite 100% because of all, you know, and things like that. Having that kindness and compassion, it all starts with you. I often laugh and say, this is the one time when you can say it's all about you, Helen. You know, it all starts with you first.
People find it hard to do that though, don't they?
Almost. And again, a lot of that can be upbringing and things that we're told when we're little. And I can remember working with a lady, and she said, it feels so selfish to give me that time. My grandma, she was a very, very Suffolk woman. I don't think she ever went outside of Suffolk, but one of her phrases, and I've thought about that a lot, was, you can't pour from, this is when often I think when I didn't want to go, when she was babysitting and I didn't want to go to bed, and she was going, you need your sleep to enjoy tomorrow and things like that. And she said, you can't pour from an empty vessel, or words along those lines. And, you know, you need to still make sure you're full up for you to be able to do what you can do to other people. If you're constantly pouring from empty, nothing left for you. Everybody else gets it and they're fine, and you're not. So I would say be really kind and compassionate to yourself. If you're going through a hard time, that's okay. The thing, and rather than beating yourself up. And again, it goes back to that choice. We can choose to beat ourselves up about it. Oh, you're no good, you're rubbish, you're useless. Or we can choose to be kind. Okay, I'm having a bit of a hard time at the moment. That's okay. And that's one of my main sort of things. I would say the other one is very much being mindful. We hear a lot about mindfulness, of being in the moment, because often when we're unwell, I've got a friend who calls it time leaping, but we time leap and we think, well, what's going to happen in December, or what's going to happen in September? We don't know. Or we can go back the other way. Oh, things were so much better then. And they may have been, but if we keep dwelling on all that sort of thing, so like the lady at the concentration camp, if she'd have constantly dwelled on her life before Auschwitz, it would have finished her off, really. Learning to be really mindful in the moment. Okay, today I'm having a chat with Helen. It's really good. I'm really enjoying it, rather than thinking, oh my goodness, what if my diary's empty next week, and things like that, because I can't control that part of it. But it's, and if I look too much to the future, too much to the past, I don't enjoy anything, actually. And that's a skill, and the more you practice it, I know myself as well, I have to do everything. I say to the people I work with, I say, hey, I do this myself as well, because it can be so easy as a small business owner to go into that mind leaping ahead. But okay, I'm all right here and now, I'm enjoying it. This is lovely. So to be very mindful in the moment. And the third one I would say is reach out for help. Talk to and sometimes that might just be just phoning a friend. Do you know what, I'm having a day today, just not feeling great. That can be enough. You know, the more we internalize it, the harder it can become, the bigger it can become. And then once it's a big thing, it can feel a lot harder to overcome. So just reach out and go, I'm just having a bit of a bad day at the moment, and have a few friends that you feel comfortable that you can do that with.
They're great top tips, thank you. It's been really interesting to talk to you. I think it's so important that we have this really good understanding of mental health, because I think, we may all face it, or certainly we all know people that struggle with it, and we've all got a role to play. And I think you're doing a brilliant job. I'm so excited for you. I think your whole career path has been so interesting, and I think you're doing something that is just absolutely brilliant. Really, really proud of all that you've done and you've achieved. It's amazing, and thank you for your time this morning. I've really appreciated the fact that you've given us this time and chatted, and I'm not going to pay you, don't you?
I do.
We didn't clarify that. But I've recorded it. Anyway, thank you. See you again soon. See ya. Bye.